I was coming back to talk to y'all about the Black Sun program. It just so happens that there's more information being shared. I told y'all about the Black Sun program, but now there's a Sumerian tablet that actually explains exactly what I'm about to show you. So yeah, you can keep thinking that things are just doubting, or people are just making up what they want to say, or this is somebody's interpretation, or whatever you want to do. You can do whatever you like to do, but don't act like we didn't tell you the truth. Don't act like you don't know. Don't act like you have to go through all this other shit and figure out who you can believe because you don't know how to use your own brain. Don't do that. Because we've told you, we've showed you, and I'm about to give you some detailed information. Irrefutable. Yeah, I'm smiling. Is anything about this funny? No. But we here though. And we've been here though. So what they don't report on is why we're still here. That's what you're gonna find out today. Don't say no prayers.
Tablet says the Anunnaki didn't come to Earth to help humanity evolve. They came because they were losing a war. Not a war with weapons, but a war of energy. The text describes a conflict with another group of beings, referred to only as those who dwell in the outer darkness. These beings existed in a frequency range that the Anunnaki couldn't access. They were starving the Anunnaki of resources, specifically the resources tied to consciousness energy. The Anunnaki had built an empire across multiple star systems, but their technology, their entire civilization, ran on harvested consciousness frequency. And the outer darkness beings were systematically cutting off their supply. So the Anunnaki came to Earth, not because Earth was special, but because it was remote, far enough from the conflict that they could build a containment system without interference. The tablet describes Earth as the hidden farm, a place where consciousness could be cycled indefinitely, generating energy with each reset, completely isolated from outside intervention. Humans weren't created to worship the gods. Humans were created to power them. The tablet is very specific about this. It uses the Sumerian term Lu Kig to Ji for A, which translates to worker made to return. Not worshiper, not servant, worker. A biological machine engineered to generate the one resource the Anunnaki couldn't synthesize, consciousness energy derived from emotional experience. Code 5 describes the selection process. Not everyone gets reset the same way. The tablet divides human consciousness into 3 categories. The first category, those with strong knowing, refers to people who retain too much awareness between cycles. These consciousnesses were flagged as risks. The system couldn't fully wipe them, so instead they were eroded into what the tablet calls the slow path, a series of lifetimes designed to break their memory through repeated trauma. The tablet doesn't describe this as punishment, it describes it as correction. If a consciousness remembers too much, it might resist the next reset. So the system deliberately programs traumatic life circumstances to fracture that awareness. The second category, those who flow easily, refers to the majority of humanity. These consciousnesses accepted the reset without resistance and were cycled back into new bodies almost immediately. The tablet describes this as the ideal state from the Anunnaki perspective. No memory fragments, no resistance, just smooth, efficient recycling that generates maximum emotional frequency with minimum system strain. The third category Those who refused the light were the ones who somehow avoided the beacon entirely. The tablet describes these as the ones who scatter, consciousnesses that escape the containment field. But here's the problem. The tablet also describes a failsafe. If a consciousness refused the light, the system activated what the text calls the second lure, a personalized projection designed to exploit the emotional bonds from the previous life. Dead relatives, lost loved ones, spiritual guides, all of them projected illusions pulling you back toward the reset station. Code 6 describes the memory insertion process. After the wipe, consciousness doesn't return to Earth as a blank slate. The Anunnaki preloads certain emotional triggers, fears, desires, traumas that weren't earned in the upcoming life but were carried over from the archive. This explains why some people are born with inexplicable phobias or attractions. It's not past life memory bleeding through, it's intentional programming. The tablet describes this as the weight that ensures return, a set of emotional anchors that make it nearly impossible for consciousness to break free on its own. You're not just living a new life. You're living a life that's been pre-configured to keep you trapped. But the insertion process serves another purpose. The Anunnaki discovered early on that consciousness without challenge produces weak emotional frequency. Suffering generates stronger energy than contentment. So they programmed conflicts into each life before it even started at insertion phase. A fear of abandonment that sabotages relationships. An attraction to unavailable partners. A self-destructive impulse that undermines success. These aren't random psychological quirks. According to the tablet, they're installed during the insertion phase specifically to ensure maximum emotional intensity. The system doesn't want you to be happy. It wants you to feel. And pain makes you feel more than anything else. Code 7 is the population threshold. This is where the tablet gets disturbingly specific. It describes a number, an exact number, that the Anunnaki programmed into the system. If the human population on Earth exceeds this threshold, the reset mechanism accelerates. More deaths, more chaos, more conflict. The system is designed to maintain balance, not for humanity's benefit, but for optimal energy extraction. When the population grows too large, the emotional frequency becomes diluted. Too many people generating low-intensity experience spreads the harvest too thin. The Anunnaki need concentrated suffering, not diffuse contentment. So the system triggers events that thin the population back to manageable levels. The tablet doesn't call these events natural, it calls them the corrections, and it describes the mechanism in detail. The system monitors population levels through what the text calls the count of flesh, a continuous census that tracks how many biological vessels are currently inhabited by consciousness. When that count approaches the threshold, the system activates stressors. It doesn't directly cause war or disease. It amplifies existing tensions. It accelerates the spread of existing pathogens. It intensifies resource scarcity that was already present. The tablet describes this as pushing what already leans, a strategy that makes the corrections appear organic rather than engineered. Before we move on to the next code, stop for a second. What you just heard about Code 7 is the part that changes everything. But it only makes sense when you see it written out next to the original Sumerian notation. The population number, the trigger conditions, it's all in the document linked below. Take 5 seconds right now, grab it, and then come back. Because what comes next builds directly on it. The link is in the description. QR code is on your screen. Code 8 describes the energy harvest itself. The tablet uses the term Anki-A, which translates to heaven, earth, water. In Sumerian cosmology, this referred to the 3 realms of existence, but in this technical context, it describes the 3-phase energy extraction. Heaven refers to the initial separation, when consciousness detaches and releases a burst of high-frequency energy. Earth refers to the compression of memory, when emotional data is archived and converted into usable frequency. Water refers to the final stage, when consciousness is reinserted into biological matter and the cycle restarts. Each phase generates energy. Each phase feeds the Anunnaki. The tablet describes this energy as the bread of the gods, not literal food, but the sustenance that keeps their civilization functioning. The harvest isn't evenly distributed. The tablet explains that different emotional states generate different quality frequencies. Terror produces sharp, intense bursts, useful for immediate power needs. Grief produces sustained waves that can be stored for extended periods. Love produces high vibration frequency the Anunnaki use for what the tablet calls the building of forms, which researchers believe refers to their ability to manipulate matter at quantum levels. This is why the system doesn't just program suffering into human lives, it programs love too. Relationships, bonds, connections that create joy, not because the Anunnaki are benevolent, but because love generates a specific frequency they need for construction. You're not just an energy source, you're a factory producing multiple product lines. And if you live a life of minimal emotional intensity, if you somehow manage to exist in a state of detachment, the system flags you as low yield and recycles you into increasingly difficult circumstances in future lives, specifically designed to force emotional response. Code 9 describes the override command. This is the part that should concern you most. If a consciousness somehow manages to break through the first 8 codes, if it resists the light, rejects the memory wipe, and refuses reincarnation, there's a final failsafe. The system projects what the tablet calls the face of the highest, a being that appears as pure authority, indescribable power, absolute divinity. The text describes this as the last deception. It's not God, it's not source consciousness, it's a holographic construct designed to overwhelm any remaining resistance. The projection tells you that you've ascended, that you've broken free, that you're now entering the highest realm, and the moment you accept that identity, the moment you believe you've transcended, the trap resets and you're pulled back into the cycle as a volunteer. Because the system doesn't just need compliance,